Have you given any thought to contributing to the Melt? It's easy to do. Just click the Patreon link in the episode notes, and for as little as $3 a month, you can get access to bonus episodes, early access to regular episodes, and you can also participate in monthly Zoom meetups. It helps to keep the magic happening here at the Melt. So I encourage you to karmically entangle yourself with the Melt today by subscribing monthly for less than the price of a container of goatee wax, or a prosthetic pinky, or a half stick of DMT butter, or an inflatable casket, or the shrunken head of an Atlantean supermodel, or a woolly mammoth's merkin, or a crystalline replica of Baba Yaga's hut, or a capsule of Sasquatch dander.
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
Before we get into today's episode, let's start off with a story from Matt Williams having to do with today's subject, dreams.
When I was 20 years old, I lived in Pennsylvania for the summer. I spent my time reading the book of 1 John from the Bible, playing my mandolin and looking at flowers in my flower identification guide. I lived on a tomato farm out in the country by the Susquehanna River, and it was beautiful. I'd always had psychic visions and mystical inclinations from a very young age, but the fundamentalist Christianity that I grew up in was really scientific materialism, because it kind of gave over all the worldly, so to speak, all the earthly realm to kind of the normal way of looking at things, which is that anything that seems magical or seems unexplainable is explainable, and it's explainable in physical terms. You know, the mind is reduced to the brain. There's an explanation for everything, and it's a physical explanation. So that's kind of how I was raised, and I never really had a place for all the visions I had. That the book of 1 John says God is light and in him is no darkness at all. And that eventually revolutionized my idea of God, because I realized that my idea of God was not God, because I worried about God and things like that. So eventually this whole summer really was a seed for what became eventually leaving the church at about age 30, leaving it completely finally, and dedicating myself to being a full-time witch or something like that. So this is the story. I had a recurring dream that summer of being on a boat standing against the wall, and in front of me there's a platform with a railing, and the water is out there, of course, because we're out on a boat. And there's these two maybe 13, 14, 15-year-old Chinese kids standing out there, a male and a female, and they're kind of like surreptitiously touching each other, kind of touching hands and making eyes at each other in a very kind of like young adolescent way, right? Sneaky and uncomfortable and awkward. And I'm just standing there observing, not really being creepy, but, you know, there's a lot of people on the boat, but I'm just noticing these two doing this. And then one of their I guess, siblings perhaps, or somebody they're traveling with, seems like a sibling kind of relationship, comes out, and this young child's of 6 or 7, and he points at them and says, "You two are flirting," and then they instantaneously stop. They pull their hands away and kind of walk off, and then my vision in the dream would pan to the right, and there was somebody selling popcorn out of a popcorn machine there, and a few people there buying popcorn, and I had this vision. It wasn't a vision, it was a dream. I had the dream 3 times. I wrote it down in detail. I saw the entire scene 3 times. So, I had it 3 times. It was verifiably there. I had even talked to people about it because it was so unusual. It was a very specific vision I had. So at the end of the summer, when I was leaving Pennsylvania, somebody took the group of us who were working there up to New York City. And while we were there, we took the Staten Island ferry to look at the Statue of Liberty, which it's a great way to look at the Statue of Liberty. As we were going across, I was standing on the ferry, and I snapped into the dream vision. I was standing there, and the Chinese kids were standing there in front of me. They were flirting. It was the same kids. I had seen them already, and I was like, "Oh my God, this little kid's about to walk out. I've seen this before." So I knew that I had a premonition of this. I knew that I knew I had a premonition of it, even, right? Because at that time I was still testing if there was really magic in the world, and so I knew that I knew. It was one of those moments of major confirmation for me. So yeah, the kids were there flirting. They were touching hands. They were laughing, kind of, making eyes at each other. And then out from my right, just like in the dream, this 6 or 7-year-old kid comes out, young boy, and he says, "You two are flirting," and they immediately stop and then walk away. And then I look to the right, and there's the person selling popcorn and the people there buying the popcorn. That's kind of inconsequential in the particulars of the dream, perhaps. Although, you could read into that. But, it was a seed for me, because it was one of those things where I knew that I knew. And it was a conscious thought process for me, thinking about if magic was real, if everything could be reduced to some sort of not scientific, but materialistic explanation. And at that moment, I knew it couldn't. That I had 3 dreams of this vision, and then I had seen it. So that's an unexplainable, mysterious experience I've had. And since I've adopted this witch worldview, I live in magic every day. I have magical experiences all the time, and purposely so. Things that seem acausal on a material plane, but definitely connected. So anyway, thanks for listening.
Dreams have always been a compelling subject to me. I've had dreams that have completely felt as if I were interacting with other autonomous and sentient beings that seemed to take place in an objective locale that contained elements and details that I felt were completely outside of the realm of my imagination. After high school, I stumbled upon the Carlos Castaneda books about Don Juan, where it was mentioned that to help yourself to become aware within a dream, you should try to remember to look at your hands during the dream. This technique did the trick for me, and I began to regularly have lucid dreams. Perhaps dreams are a realm that consists of pure imagination in the sense of being able to instantaneously manifest objects or situations at will, or travel anywhere instantaneously just by thinking about it. Perhaps it is a glimpse at a realm that is not restricted to the physical and its seemingly inherent laws, and all of the assumptions that we have accumulated in regards to it ever since we can remember. Today's guest, author and fellow podcaster Lee Adams, is here today to talk with us about his latest book, A Visionary Guide to Lucid Dreaming. I start off the conversation by asking Lee how he came to the subject of dreaming.
I spent a lot of time as a kid dreaming. I kind of had a abnormal sleep behavior, I'd say. I stayed up really late and then kind of slept during the day and things like that. So probably a lot of kids growing up my generation are kind of like that, I think, with computers and things like that. So, um, but I had a abnormal amount of dreams, I think, and kind of this vividness to my dreams as a child. And my mother, she would entertain me by listening to my dreams, and I don't think she really believed many things that I was experiencing in my dreams. But she was very religious, and she spent a lot of time um, focusing on my dreams and kind of facilitating the aspects of dreams and religion together, kind of like encouraging me to go more into them, and kind of looking at them in this like more spiritual way than maybe other kids my age would have had. And so so I really kind of took that to heart, and really kind of thought, well, maybe there's more to this as a child, but kind of left it at that. And but just kind of was open, I think, to dreams and listening to them, and being from a spiritual background as a child. And my mother, she would imply that, like, these are kind of messages from God and things like that, not necessarily like God specifically speaking to you, but, to pay attention to it that way. And so I would kind of do that, like, I'd be like, oh, well, maybe there's a message here or something to listen to, something more going on. And that kind of just expanded into a more vivid dream world, I think, and it kind of just grew from there.
Yeah, it's like, it seems like the more that you entertain your dreams or pay attention to them, especially if you start writing them down, the more you you develop a conversation almost with them. Like they become, you remember them more, and they become more vivid. And did you find that too?
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, nowadays I tend to find dreams as very much like a conversation that you'd have with somebody, and I kind of treat them like that. So, if you sit down with a friend or something like that, or somebody you don't know, I guess would be more like it, and you don't say anything, it becomes very awkward quickly, and nobody really wants to talk. The conversation's kind of not happening. So the more that you engage with the person, you ask them questions, you kind of live in their world as they're describing something, the more, it becomes very vivid and real to you. So I think dreams are a lot of the same way. If you're open to them, you're willing to listen, you're willing to communicate back, you're willing to kind of take that dream and create a myth out of it into your waking reality. So like extending the dream, thinking about it throughout your day, and talking to other people about those dreams, maybe kind of open up and become more part of your life, and the conversation continues. So yeah, definitely.
It's like a muscle that you're exercising that gets stronger.
Definitely.
Is there?
Yeah, I think a muscle is a great analogy to it. Yeah.
Is there a sequence of events when you're going to sleep that you do? Is there a ritualistic nature to your sleep, like to kind of prepare you to go into the dreaming world?
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily do that all the time, so I'm just like everybody else that's not really disciplined. And so I have a practice that I'd like to do, right, every single night, but usually it kind of falls off the wagon, and then I kind of just create my own. And so my discipline is different than what I'd prescribe to other people probably to try to do to facilitate like lucid dreaming, things like that. But what I typically do is I try to relax and kind of, and I actually ask myself, to have experiences, to be open to having experiences, and to be kind of open to like whatever is going to come to me. And that seems to be like a more healthier way, long term for myself. But in order for people to have, say, if they've never had a lucid dream, or they really can't recall their dreams, things like that, there's many techniques that you can do to kind of facilitate that. And a lot of, and they're in my book, but the primary ones is like the wake back to bed method, and then a mild method. And those are the ones that I usually prescribe to people because they've been the most researched, and they have the most success in those researched environments. And that's what I kind of support, is like the more scientific approach to things. And so if you want me to go through, I can kind
Yeah.
of
That would
touch
be
on those.
great.
But
Yeah, so
maybe
yeah.
either before you go into that or after, define, just in case there's somebody out there that doesn't know actually what a lucid dream is. Maybe we can define that
Yeah.
for them.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Lucid dreams, there's a lot of people that have many definitions for lucid dreams. And so my most basic definition is essentially having some form of awareness that you're dreaming. So you recognize that the environment that you're experiencing is some kind of dream, and that you have some type of awareness of that. People put in other things like control into the dream. So some people will be like, oh, you're lucid dreaming if you can control your dream, right? And I used to think that as well. And that does imply that you have some type of realization that you're dreaming. So it is lucid dreaming, but control isn't necessarily part of that. Control can be an illusion. So some people think that they control, their dream world. And really, like, the world around them is generated by the mind, you could say. And so do you have control over the dream world in its totality? Like, is everything that is in the dream world, are you in control of that? And typically the answer is no, because there's some type of awareness that's actually generating all the dream around you all the time. And there is even some debate of being controlled of awareness in a dream space, implying that, like, the idea itself that you're aware is generated by the dream, and that you're actually just kind of having this illusion that you're aware even inside the dream world.
Interesting.
So it's very relatable to waking reality. If you think of waking reality as a big dream, like you and I think, oh yes, we are so aware, like in this big dream. But really, like, if you listen to the deep meditators and things like that, you realize that really we're actually asleep and we think we're aware,
Yeah.
So but that's kind of going back to, like, lucid dream is essentially just that awareness aspect of it is what I think is important, because all the other stuff is kind of just piling on more and making it a little bit more complicated. So
Okay, so the techniques.
yeah, so the primary techniques, I'll go through the first one, which is wake back to bed, and that's really one of the most effective. And it implies that most people, when they go to sleep, there's many other methods to lucid dreaming, and I'll go into one method that's very complicated and hard to do, and why back to bed is so effective. So, like, when you're going to sleep, usually if you try to recall the moment that you actually start dreaming, that's very difficult. I'm not really capable of doing that. I may have done it once in my entire life, and that's for, like, every single day, trying to pay attention to the point that I actually lose consciousness, and then the dream starts appearing in my mind. And usually there's like I get to the point where there's like this transitional state where memories start coming into my mind that aren't mine, and then it gets very confusing, and then there's a point where I black out, and then I'm in a dream world, I'll wake up and I recall the dream. And so that's very difficult to do. It takes a lot of discipline and a lot of awareness, I think, to get to that point. And also sometimes you're lucky and you can have, like, sleep paralysis and things like that to get into it. So we can go into that later. But
Sure.
the reason that wake back to bed is so effective is because when the body's trying to go to sleep and the mind's trying to go to sleep, it kind of just really is tired. Like, it desires to go into a dream immediately. Like, it desires to fall asleep and lose consciousness. So what people do is after a period of time, you can set an alarm for a period of time, say like 5 hours or 6 hours or something like that, where you're still going to be tired, and you're going to wake up out of that. So you can do this if you're an older person and you like to get up and go to the bathroom. It's a perfect opportunity to do wake back to bed. And so you wake up, and then what you do is you stay up for a little period of time. I prefer around 30, sometimes 60 minutes, so an hour, and kind of wake myself up. And then I go back and I lay down. And what I find is it's really easy to relax at that point. Before, it's incredibly hard for my body to relax all the muscles down to the point that I can transition into this dream space. But if I'm have a little bit of, like, I have that relaxation from being rested kind of for a period of time and a desire to go back to sleep, but then kind of trick my body by waking it up more than it typically should be when I just go to the bathroom or something like that, and then pay attention to the my body and my mind as I actually fall asleep. And oftentimes it's a really quick transition, so it can actually go through like the transition of falling asleep, and you feel those effects take on your body, and then you can go straight into a dream space and bring awareness into it. So that's very effective in that sense. And a lot of people experience like out of body experiences and things like that when they go through it in sleep paralysis. Those are kind of natural events that can take place with wake back to bed. The other one is the mild technique. So it implies mnemonic induced lucid dreaming, and that's a very large word, but it essentially means that just like we use words, kind of like acronyms, to remember a large series of words, they're kind of using the same technique to induce a lucid experience. The name is very confusing if you go down there that way, but just forget the name. I think that's the easiest way to do it. But the technique is what's important, and the technique is you wake up from having a dream that may not have been lucid. And so what you're going to do is, so say you woke up because of some middle of the night event, going to the bathroom, or a lot of people, it's common for people to wake up around 3 to 4 times a night, and they just generally don't remember it. So say you wake up in the night, and it's one of those times that you may have not remembered it or whatever, but this time you will, and you recall the dream that you had prior to waking up. So say I'm dreaming of something mundane, of riding a bicycle down the road or something like that. Well, I'm going to recall that dream, and then I'm going to think about that dream as if I'm lucid in that dream. So I'm riding the bicycle, and maybe I become aware that this environment is a dream experience. And so I'm lucid now in my mind. And now I get off the bike, and maybe I fly, or I go talk to the dream characters, or I do something, right, that I typically wouldn't in a dream. So I'm imagining that as I'm recalling the dream. So I'm kind of like implanting a false memory in a way of having this experience that I didn't have. And then as I'm going back to sleep, I set the intention for the next dream to be a lucid dream. So I'm saying in my mind, this is the dream I had. This is what would happen if I was lucid. And the next dream, this is what I want to do. And so you're kind of keeping those two things in your mind at the same time as you fall back to sleep. And those, that was made by Stephen LeBerg, who is one of the first people that have done real studies on lucid dreams. And he used that method to train his participants in order to kind of quantify lucid dreaming, do the experiments in lucid dreaming. So he finds it very effective, and he still teaches that today. Those are kind of like the primary two that are really effective, and they can be combined together, obviously, because one implies that you wake up, and go back to sleep, which is kind of the same thing as mild with the wake back to bed. So you can kind of combine the two together to really create this like kind of super super lucid dream experience or whatever. So yeah.
Are those the ones that you primarily use too? Are those the ones that work best for you?
Yeah, I'd say that the primary one that I used the most was wake back to bed, and I still use that from time to time. And so I was in the military, and in around 2008, and I would often get up and go work out with my military unit. And I was going to school at the time too, so I'd wake up, go work out with my group, and then I'd go back to sleep and take a nap for 30 minutes and then go to school because I like to sleep. And so in doing so, here I am, I wake up, 4 a.m, go work out for an hour, and then I immediately come home and go back to sleep. That, I didn't understand what that was, but that is wake back to bed. And it was allowing me to essentially have a lucid dream almost every single night.
Wow.
And I was like, what is going on here? These crazy experiences. I didn't really understand it at the time. this was way before I wrote my book. So, so I was pretty new at it still, but, so I that gave me a lot of opportunity. And then, later in life, I essentially went back to those techniques after getting out of the military and having time to kind of work on my dreams again, and did the same method, and it worked. It worked 80% of the time. I'd say I had a very vivid lucid dream. I always had some type of awareness in my dreams. The hardest part is being able to relax enough to go back to sleep after you wake up for an hour. So you kind of have to practice this relaxation to the point that you don't just stay there and don't do anything. And a common thing for me is I'll be laying there and I'll think that I'm never going to go back to sleep. Like, I've done this countless times where I'm just sitting there or laying there in my bed. I'm like, this is never going to work. I should just get up and stop, go work, just give it up. And almost every single time right after I think that, I'm asleep, or I feel the transition into sleep, and I'm having a lucid dream. So, don't give up, but it may take some practice to get to the point that you're being very effective at these tools.
You said something that kind of sparked a thought in my brain when you were talking about perception in our waking life, and how there's kind of a narrow field of what we're perceiving, but we're probably perceiving, and I would opine that we're perceiving a lot more than we're just filtering it through our brain and our cognition, because if we were perceiving everything that's happening around us on the planet at the same time, we'd probably go crazy. So
Yeah.
I kind of compare that to attention in the dream world, because there's probably layer upon layer of things that you're perceiving, but your brain kind of has to narrow the field. And maybe that's why some people think that they have control of their dreams, because what they're really controlling is that narrow field of perception that they're bringing.
Yeah, I'd agree to that. What I've realized through my dream experiences, in lucid dreams, is that these aren't just like, like, it's common for people that want to have lucid dreams to kind of just focus on that. They're like, I want awareness in my dream so I can do A, B, C, D. What they don't realize is when they do that, like you said, they're narrowing kind of this idea of what the dream is providing to them. So, like, the dream is really like this infinite space that contains countless layers in it that you can kind of pull out, and then kind of realize, like, your current state, your current psyche state, spiritual state, body state, all these different layers that are practically impossible to understand or just describe to people, or even to yourself. So it's something that kind of has to be lived through, like a really organic living thing. And so, like, trying to pull it apart, and dissect it, and to control, like you said, this narrow aspect of it, is kind of really diluting the dream into, like, something that's really not meant to be. So it's really like, watching a favorite movie almost, and you're watching this movie, and the first time you watch it, you may get one layer of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then you watch it again and you get another layer of it that you never saw before. And then say you live, like 20 years or whatever past watching the first time, and you watch it again, you have children now or something that you didn't have before, and you watch it again and it's totally different now, And so it's like the movie never changed. What changed is you're looking at all of the different layers, you're reflecting on it, you're projecting into it, all these different things that create this, like, living organism, which is the movie. And dreams are your own manifestation, like, they are so much more powerful than a movie could possibly ever be. It's every piece of you goes into that thing. So it's like, I've written dreams down that I had forgotten about, 10, 15 years ago, and I go back and I reread it, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I just never even saw this, this thing in it. And it's so, it can be applied so much to my current life that it's like, I was dreaming almost of something prolific for me, like,
Yeah.
was telling me something to be aware of, or something I was missing and I didn't get it at before. Or you maybe talk to somebody about your dream, and I've done this, and they say something back, and it's so mundane to them. They're like, oh, blah blah blah, and you're like, I never realized this. Of course, it's right there in front of me, and I just can't see it. And in an analogy to waking life, it's absolutely the same thing.
Yeah.
Like we don't see the things that we're blinded from.
Exactly.
Somebody else may, or time frame or whatever. So
I love
dreams teach us so much about waking life that it's incredible.
I love this idea of waking back to bed, because it's something that I've kind of naturally done over the course of my life. And I've noticed that when I do that in the daytime, like if I wake up in the morning and then I go back to bed, I notice that the quality of my dreams is completely different. They're way more intense. And what I've often wondered, is it because other people are awake and conscious, and I'm calibrating or receiving a lot more data that's out in the ether because I'm open and I'm in the dream world. Do you notice
so there's
that?
a lot to be said about that. It's been known that mainstream science would pretty much disagree with this, but there's plenty of research that shows that essentially the sun itself and the moon absolutely affect like the amount of data kind of going around on the earth. So like when the sun is active, the electromagnetic field of the sun is very like potent onto the earth and creates kind of like chatter and noise into the mind. So when the moon's out, especially like full moons or transitioning phases of the moon, things like that, it really kind of interacts with that field of the sun. So we don't get as much chatter that we normally would. And these are just basic like fundamentals of noise and radio and things like that you guys probably know. So, it's like, of course, this would make sense. But the problem is most people don't think that human bodies are electromagnetic things,
Right.
which is absolutely false because, so I do EEGs for a neurologist in the area. And the only way that we do EEGs is because we're picking up electrical magnetic pulses from the human brain.
Mm-hmm.
So like it's ridiculous to think that, and that's just a super basic thing, this is like 1950s technology. So like anymore, we've absolutely discovered that human beings are electrical, magnetic beings, and that we receive noise and things like that from not just locally, but our sun, which is the biggest electrical magnetic object in our solar system. So, and we also perceive material outside our solar system too, which the sun interacts with. So dreams change based on the polarity of or the phases of the moon, daytime, nighttime. So like I primarily lucid dream during the daytime, oddly. So most of my dreams are this daytime experience.
Right.
But sometimes I have a nighttime experience, and it seems if I would pay attention to that, I would see there's some type of difference going on here. Maybe it's darker or something like that, like in content and physically, So there's a lot of changes. If the real problem is we just don't pay attention to these things very closely, and we're not very scientific about it, right? So, but if we did pay attention to it very intensely, we'd see these differences, and they would become bigger as our awareness focuses more into that area. So you're absolutely right, I think.
Yeah, and back to what you were saying about people sometimes go into lucid dreaming with an agenda, and they kind of miss the point of that, interacting with that world, and how that people do that in waking life too. They have an agenda that they're, setting after, going after in their life, and they completely forget to, life is not all about, say, attaining a career, making money, and buying stuff. It might be about learning to become a better human being and developing great relationships with people. So it's interesting applying that to the dream world, because it's a totally different environment altogether. I remember when I started lucid dreaming in my 20s, early 20s, I just started, I was just messing around with physics that physical laws that I was just tweaking them in a way that I couldn't in my waking life. I would start, jumping off of skyscrapers and flying around and, making things levitate and stuff like that. And I was like, now I look back and I'm sure that served its purpose, but I probably could have been doing something higher in that in that state, as opposed to just fucking around with the laws of physics. It's kind of funny, but I haven't lucid dreamed for such a long time. I don't know what I would do if I started doing that, but I need to apply some.
You're very different.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't judge. I try not to judge people based on whatever desires they're chasing after at the time, because I'm chasing after desires now, of some kind, and looking back to, like, as you used your example of dreams and lucid dreaming, I was very similar. Like, I would try to control the dream world, try to manifest like a beautiful woman,
Yes.
do that,
Of course,
and have the money, do all these things that I really kind of desired at the time. But thankfully, I had a mind that was very like trying to teach me a lesson. And so in the dreams, what started happening to me is I would try to control something, and then the dream characters would start fighting back. And I was like, what is going on here? This is my dream. Why are you, able to do things? And they're like, they're not dreaming. I'm dreaming you. And I was like, what? And then they would do things to me, like, they'd be like, oh, you want to mess around? Well, and you think you're powerful, I'll start making you forget things. And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, what's your mom's name? And I'm like, I don't know. And I'm like, and they're like, I can take away more if you keep going. And I'm like, and it became very terrifying very quickly.
Wow. Dream bullies.
It's like, wow, this thing has like these characters have control over me, over my own memory.
Interesting.
And, and I had a good teacher in waking life that, I was taking a Buddhist class at the time, and I was having like sleep paralysis and attacking kind of these nightmare figures in my dreams. And I was very proud of myself. So I go into the Buddhist class and talk to my teacher, and I'm like, oh yeah, I have these amazing dreams, and these are the things that I do in my dreams. I'm so amazing, right? That's what I expect. I was expecting him to like respond like my friends did and be like, wow, like really cool. And he did not do that. And so he was like, well, why would you attack, these things? Like, they're part of you. He's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, and he's like, wouldn't it be better to have a conversation with them, And I was like, oh. And I was like, well, I'll try that. And so that night I went to sleep, or I guess it was the next day in the morning, because my schedule, and I woke up in my room, and I immediately realized I was dreaming. So I went out into the hallway, which is this apartment kind of building that I lived in, and I walked down, and I turned around, and there's like a zombie being coming at me, and I'm like, I want to attack this thing. That's my initial response, is like aggression towards it, and just get it out of there. And I was like, no, I need to talk to it. So I bent my head over, because the zombies that I like are the ones that terrify me the most, are the ones that eat brains. And I was like, just get it over with. And it crunched into my skull, and then it was kind of silent, and I was like, okay. And I looked up at it. I'm like, hey, let's sit down. Let's have a conversation. And it goes, okay. And so it sat down with me, and as it did, it morphed into a copy of myself. Huh. And so it was a clone.
Wow.
And I was like, oh. And then I see another zombie coming towards us, and I'm like, oh, I asked it, I go, oh, what's going on? What's the deal, And it said, I'm unsatisfied. And I was like, what are you unsatisfied about? And it said, I'm unsatisfied. It had nothing more to say besides that. And I was like, okay. And then this other zombie came down the hallway, and it turned into a clone of me as well. And I go, hey, sit down with us. And so it sat down, and it looked at the zombies looked at each other, and they took wires out from their stomach, and they exchanged them. and then they morphed into each other, and then morphed into me. They like just came into me, and I immediately woke up, and I was like, what the heck was that about? And I was like, okay, like I had no idea. But one thing I did realize is like I was suffering with like a lot of depression and kind of like anxiety at the time in my life. And as that happened, over a period of time, things started changing. And I always kind of remembered that piece, it's like, I wonder if that started at that point, like these kind of fragmented pieces of myself were kind of merging back into themselves and like kind of reassimilating themselves into me. And I was like, So ever since then, I really tried to kind of like understand these more negative, quote unquote negative aspects of myself instead of like fighting them, trying to get rid of them and just removing them, because you don't know what you're really removing,
True. Absolutely.
It's dangerous, I think.
So where does language fall into this? When you have a lucid dream, is it easy for you to communicate like the next day or the next part of that same day for you to communicate to someone else what's happened? Because what I notice with my dreams is that when I'm lucid dreaming, if I try to speak what's happened, it's all visual, but being able to give it words and share that with someone else, it's like I become mute, and then the dream starts to kind of dissipate and fall away. But I feel like it's still in my brain. I just can't connect words with the visual image.
Yeah. Well, everybody's different, and I don't think there's anything wrong with not being able to communicate it verbally to somebody. I think that oftentimes just having the dream, like my zombie one, I didn't have to necessarily understand or communicate to other people what that dream meant, to me. Just having it kind of is celebration of the dream itself, to recall it, to be able to recall it in my mind. Right. And when we talk, it removes an element of that dream.
Right.
So like dreams can't be reduced down to just language or visual.
Exactly.
Because they're alive, and oftentimes what we're remembering consciously isn't even really like it, It's just like a veil of it, or a piece of it. So it's not about reducing it down and really like trying to show other people, like I was doing, like, oh, look at the amazing dreams I'm having, It's more of like, just if the dream needs to be communicated, I think that would be very easy for you to do. But there's so much more going on. So like, oddly, like I was talking to a friend right before your podcast, I was talking about a dream I had last night, and in describing it to him, even the short version of it, it reduced it down and it didn't make any sense. And because in the dream it was so emotional, and it didn't make sense that it was really so emotional to somebody else. But if I recall it in my mind, it makes total sense of why that would be such a impactful experience. But like, even if I told you the dream, it would really bring in that that energy, So, and the same thing with like other dreams I've had. I had a dream that I was in the military. I was 14 years in and had a good career, and I had a choice to kind of get out or to stay in. And I had a dream, and the dream again didn't really make sense. Like if I explained it to people, they really wouldn't understand exactly like the elements of it. But it was enough to get me out of the military, to make the decision to leave. I was like, I cannot do it. And it was, again, such an emotional thing. Like I could not even describe the dream without starting to cry. But like on text, if somebody just read the dream, they'd be like, what is going on here,
Right.
So it's so much deeper that even consciously trying to understand that wouldn't even make sense to me. Like it didn't make sense to me why it was so impactful, but it was. So kind of answer that?
Absolutely. I have so many questions. I'm trying to be respectful of Chris because I know he has a bunch too.
No, go for it. If something leads off of that, go for it.
Have you had the experience of dreaming with other people where they are cognizant of the dream as well?
Yeah, like, are you meaning like a shared dream kind of?
Mm-hmm.
Or yeah, so I've had a few. Um, they usually don't work the same way as people would think they work, like waking reality.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so um, it's very hard to even describe, but essentially, I had a shared dream with somebody, and they didn't fully remember it, but they remember pieces of it in a way. And then through conversation later in the day, like I'll try to describe part of it. Like, we kind of set it up as an experiment. Um, they didn't believe that you could have shared dreams,
Right.
and they kind of believe that dreams are just meaningless noise. And I was like, okay, well, let's try this experiment, see what happens, right? And so in the dream, we were supposed to tell each other something that I've never told them before, and I generally don't tell other people.
Mm-hmm.
And and so my my secret was my middle name, which even some of my great friends don't even know my middle name. It's something I don't talk about.
Mhm.
And so I was like, that'd be perfect, you know? And so we have this dream, and we come out of the dream, and I was like, oh, in the dream, I see this person, and I'm so excited. You know, I'm like, you're going to wake up tomorrow, and you're going to be so excited about this because it was so vivid. The person was talking to me, I was talking to them. It was just very realistic. And so they were like, I was like, what's your, secret? And they would tell me their secret, and it would completely get wiped out of my mind immediately.
Wow.
And I was like, ah. And I've had this happen many times in dreams before, where like I'm not allowed in a way to remember things.
Yeah.
It just gets wiped,
Same here.
like instantly. And I'm like, ah. And so I asked them again, what's your secret? And they say it to me, and I could not remember. But where we met was a park bench, and we both had decided that we were going to meet at this park bench. And over the park bench was a fruit tree. And I was like, it was peaches though. So that's important. And I was like grabbing for the peach, and they're like, don't grab the peach. And I'm like, I kept grabbing for this peach. And I was like, I don't even know why I was grabbing for this peach, right? So then we wake up, and we were talking about this, and I'm like, what was your secret, word? And they were like, oh, it was an orange. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I was like, I dreamed of this, peach tree. And I was like, that's interesting. And so then I was like, I go, what, did you remember what I said? And they go, no, I don't remember anything. And I go, okay. And so in the conversation, it didn't last very long. They go, what's your middle name? And I go, that was my secret. And they go, what? And I'm like, yeah, that's the secret. That was what I was telling you. So they're like, oh. I'm like, people just don't ask me that question.
Right.
And they've never asked me that question. I've talked to them for a year up to that point. So I found that very interesting.
Yeah.
And then I've had other people, another thing that I really enjoy is surfing, but I don't do it very often. I don't live close enough to the water, really. I live in Washington, but it's cold here and there's no waves, and not near where I am. And I'm not very good at it, and I don't talk to people about surfing. No one knows that I like surfing. So I had a friend online, and they had a dream, and they met me in the dream, and I told them things about themselves and taught them things about the dream world that I don't remember. And they go, yeah, you told me that. They said they asked me a question of what something I could tell them that other people don't know about me, and it would be something to verify when they woke up that is real. And I said, I like surfing. Nobody knows that about me, really, but just tell me that I like surfing and you'll know. And so they did, and I was like, yeah, I absolutely like surfing. And they were like, wow, that's crazy. So I don't post this, like there's no, it would be very difficult for them to find out that I like surfing, and they're not that kind of person. So anyways, and there's many other experiences like that I've had with people I know and people I don't know, where they dream of me for some reason, and I'm telling them things or whatever. And yeah, so.
That's
it
amazing.
just doesn't really work the way it doesn't
Right.
really work the way you think it does, and that's the difficult part.
Have you been in an experience where you were in a dream and you went to sleep in that dream and then entered another dream?
Yes. So I've had it a few times. I mean, I've had it many times, but um, they call it false awakening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty common with lucid dreamers to have false awakenings. And so I talk about galantamine in my book because it's a lucid dreaming supplement and it allows you to have this increase of awareness in your dream. But one thing it does to me is it causes intense false awakenings, so much so that it becomes terrifying. So I've had one dream where I woke up 10 times in the same dream and I literally couldn't wake up. And I thought for sure I had died. Like, I'm in the dream and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I think I'm dead now. And this is now where I am. And there's nothing I can do about it. And so just out of desperation, I yelled into the sky. I said, I want to wake up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I woke up immediately out of the dream, like instantly. And I was like, and I did that before in a different dream where I had similar things happening with galantamine again, where it was like 4 times where I woke up in a dream and a dream and a dream. And I was like, okay, like this is getting really annoying. And I did the same thing and it pulled me out. But it can be very like, it can be very terrifying when you're in that situation. You think, okay, I'm actually never going to wake out. Like maybe that's what a coma's like, like you just literally can't wake up and you're like, okay. So yes, I've had that.
Kind of leading off of that question, I've had experiences in dreams where I was physically fighting someone and like trying to punch them, and there was no inertia behind that, or trying to run and it felt like I was underwater and I had no speed behind me. Have you ever had an experience like that, or what would you conject something like that is?
Yeah, I had a lot of those, especially when I was younger, where trying to fight somebody, especially, and then you hit them in the face or something, and it's like, you're like arms turned to jello. Yes. You're like, what is going on? This sucks. Uh-huh. Or you're trying to run, and you're just like, okay, nothing's happening, and you just feel like really slow. I've had lucid dreams like that too, where I'm slow, like I can't talk to people. Mm-hmm. I feel very like I'm disabled, Right. And I'm like, maybe they think maybe I'm sleepwalking through my house right now and they think I'm like acting really weird. That's what I think. And of course I woke up and I was like, did I talk to you? And they're like, no. And I'm like, okay. But I think a lot of those things is just kind of like not really there's many layers to that, right? So for me, I would say I believe that people have like out of body experiences and things like that too. Mm-hmm. So you could be kind of trapped in your body still.
Right.
So like a lot of people, not a lot, but people that I respect that have written about like astral projection and lucid dreams and mm-hmm. stuff, they imply that like oftentimes we're projecting out of our bodies, but we're still having a dream, like a layer of the dream is on top of it. And sometimes we're trapped still inside of our body or trapped in a wall or something like that. And it becomes difficult to move and you're like struggling, but you manifest this dream to kind of make sense of that. Another aspect would be like, maybe you're dreaming of some part of your body that's sluggish or something like that. Mm-hmm. So like, I believe that the organs in our body have consciousness and that we can dream into those areas with our awareness and we can get stuck, or we can have like tunnel dreams where we're going through our spinal column, things like that.
Right.
So it's very difficult to say really. So I tend to kind of like leave the interpretation up to the dreamer mm-hmm. and kind of try to facilitate them into like expanding that and kind of seeing these things about themselves that they may not recognize. But for myself, a sense of control, loss of control, things like that is obviously like one of the key elements for me when I was a kid and having those kind of dreams. It's
Yeah.
like I want to fight,
Yeah.
but I literally can't hit those things.
Yeah.
And it's like, like it's
Yeah.
trying to maybe imply some type of like, give it up, man.
Yeah.
Like this is not what you're meant to do.
Yeah, you nailed
You know?
it. For me, looking back at the period of my life that I was in, I felt powerless. And those dreams really brought that to the surface. And I feel like subconsciously that was the way that my brain was able to reconcile that sense of powerlessness, was being able to see that in a dream. And then when I woke up, realizing, oh, I feel like I don't have physical power in my life or power over my life. I've also had dreams where I had no teeth.
Yeah.
Or my teeth fell out, they crumbled out of my
Yeah.
mouth. And my sense of those dreams was that it was about not having voice, not being able to speak my truth in that moment.
Yeah.
And these were all in periods of my life where I was extremely powerless, where things were happening around me that I had absolutely no control over. So I think that's the way your
I
brain...
think that's a great way of looking at it, I think, to kind of see it at that level.
Well, I think the brain is this really unique, has this unique capacity to help you resolve things that your subconscious is trying to navigate and work through, because the conscious mind kind of has a limit where it's like, okay, this is all I can handle right now. So we go into the subconscious, and the subconscious is almost like, the gerbil wheel that is in there that's going, okay, but if I just do this, I can fix this, or I can figure this out. So that's what it kind of felt like to me at the time, was that I was just trying to work stuff out.
Yeah. But I'd say that if you feel that way, if you sit there and reflect on something intensely and you really kind of embody that and you try to kind of work through that and you have a feeling come up about the meaning of something, the meaning of that experience, I think that's valid, and it's more valid than what somebody can tell you about that dream, So I've heard people say, whenever I have a teeth fall out of dream, it implies somebody in my life may be dying or something like that. I'm like,
Interesting.
okay. And so they reach out and talk to people that may be associated with the dream and check up on them or whatever. It's like, yeah, maybe. I don't know. Like, that sounds good. For me, like same as you. It's like, I don't know, my teeth are falling out, like what's going on here? And maybe, if I reflected on those dreams at the time, it would have been some type of issue with me not vocalizing, or, like certain areas of my body kind of get sick for some reason at certain times,
Yeah.
And it's like, if I really pay attention to that, maybe like some type of energy, is built up in that space and is trying to work through those things.
Right.
And like, I don't think teeth are dead. Like we kind of imply, like they have
Right.
blood vessels through them. They're alive. Dentists say they're alive and they can die. And so like maybe that energy is in your teeth, and it's sitting there, and that means something very important about vocalizing. People see your teeth, and missing your teeth,
Yeah.
that'd be terrifying, and change everything about yourself. So like, these aren't just basic like teeth, like people need to expand this out much more than they do, I think,
Do people ever trigger a dream for you by something that they say during the day? Do you ever have like a aha moment where you'll be having a conversation in your waking life with someone and they say a specific word and suddenly the flood of a dream comes back to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I can't really think of an instance like that, but absolutely. I've had that countless times. I mean, scientifically, we dream around 4 to 5 times a night on average. And I remember maybe one dream a night, if I'm lucky. And some people maybe remember more, but most people don't remember any most nights. So, yeah.
She can come back from the dream world and explain everything in microscopic detail. And I always say, I mean, there are nights that we lie down to go to sleep and she's snoring at 30 seconds in. So I say the reason that you remember your dream so much is because it's not a far trip for you. Like you're very close to that world. Like you don't have to travel far to get back. So you're able to bring more with you, you know, like,
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I wake up exhausted
Yeah.
from lucid dreaming.
Just between you and I and everybody else listening, you may want to get a sleep study done just to see what's going on with your sleep. I work for a neurologist, so I take sleep very importantly because a lot of older people have memory problems. And what I find is doing their EEGs, they're in my office for like 2 hours, and they're sitting there very relaxed and they fall asleep. And I find common that a lot of times they're very tired, and memory and sleep go hand in hand together. So if you're exhausted all the time, you may not be having like a very vivid memory and during the time that you wake up, and that long term could be very bad. So
yeah, it's wild. It's like I close my eyes to go to sleep and I wake up in a dream, and then I have a full night of lucid dreaming, and I wake up and I'm like, I have not had a night's sleep because I've been navigating and doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
and it makes me feel like I want to go back to sleep and not lucid dream.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that was simply delightful.
It was. I really enjoy talking to someone who speaks our language.
Absolutely. His book was very, very informative. It's not very big. It's a very quick read, but it's packed with lots of information about lucid dreaming and dreaming in different cultures and techniques for doing such. And Lee was great. I'm so glad that we had him on and got to actually interact with him.
I like that he brought different elements into the dialogue. It wasn't just about his experiences. It was about talking about the origins of perceptions about dreams. And I found that fascinating.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And you can't see the yawn fest that's happening.
Talking about dreams made me sleepy.
Yeah. Well, you were beforehand.
You have to let me yawn, please. Please let me yawn.
You must have had another exhausting night of lucid dreaming. Anyway, we don't need to chat long. The links obviously will be in the episode notes. I highly suggest his book. Lee is a great dude. I can tell that by spending a couple of hours with him, and I look forward to more chats in the future. There was a lot of good stuff happening there.
Yeah, I liked his doggy.
At one point, the dog was asleep in the background, but the way the dog was positioned, it looked like his dog was resting on his shoulder.
I know, it was
perfectly.
So great. And then he started twitching. It was like the dog was lucid dreaming into Lee's ear.
Yes.
It was amazing.
It was fantastic. Anyway, I hope that you gained something positive from this conversation. I did. I thought it was fantastic. It makes me want to reread the book, actually, or maybe I'll listen to the audiobook this time. Hopefully Lee reads it. And let's see, what else? Oh, we're always open for guest suggestions. You can either email us at themeltpodcast@protonmail.com or
Hunter-Muse, M-U-S-E, @protonmail.com.
And we highly suggest you going to our YouTube channel. And YouTube.
We're on
subscribing.
Yeah, we're on YouTube. We are on Telegram. We are on Discord. We are on Instagram. We're back on Facebook. So there's lots and lots of ways to connect with us. And please feel free to send us silly memes or guest suggestions, or if you just want to shout out, we're there for the shouting.
Absolutely. And spreading the word. Spreading the word is very, very important. If you come across one of our episodes that you think somebody that you know might enjoy or really need to hear at a particular point in their life, send the link. Send the link to our website. Getting this thing out is something that's been sort of a struggle because sometimes, you wonder if you're not shadow banned because you see other people with 10,000 followers and you have less than 1,000.
Yeah, but at the same time, when I look at that, I'm like, yeah, those people have 10,000 bots.
Sure.
We actually have a group of real human beings that we are interacting with. And I would far prefer that than having the illusion of having 10,000 people following us.
Sometimes I think that these conversations are so important, and I think that they could do people good if they could just cross paths with it. But I suppose those who need to do.
Yeah, and they're not going anywhere. That's the beauty of what we're doing, is that this will be here long after we have twirled around this mortal coil, and so to me, I feel like the people, as you just said, the people who hear us or that contribute in any way possible, energy, time, money, however, I think that these are the people that we want to reach.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I don't want Klaus Schwab listening to this.
Unless it could turn him into an actual human being, into a real man.
Meh.
I don't see that happening.
That's not my job.
Yeah, that's more work than I have time for.
Exactly. That's some karmic shit that he has to work through.
Absolutely.
So I'm happy with who is a part of this dialogue. And we really do love you guys. And we enjoy any interaction that we get to share with the people who are listening and the people who are contributing. We're just extremely blessed, and we're just happy that you have come this far with us and that we are going to continue to walk this path together, and more exciting conversations and dialogues to come.
Absolutely. If you don't hear back from us in a timely fashion, do not fret. Because we do really appreciate interaction. It's just we have a lot of balls in the air.
Yeah.
And
but I'm out of school for the next 3 weeks, so you may hear from me maybe more than you want. I may show up to your house with a pie or something.
You'll be getting 3 a.m. texts. You up?
Who dis?
Who dis? Anyway, thank you all so very much for listening. And there is great stuff coming. So hopefully you enjoyed it. Take care. And again, we love you.
Live your dreams
to the fullest. To hear the full-length version of this episode, get access to exclusive and early episodes, and participate in our monthly Zoom meetups for as little as $3 per month, just click the Patreon link in the episode notes or visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Contributing financially will help to make this podcast my full-time gig that I can devote more time to and allow me to create more content. Other ways of contributing would be giving us a favorable review or rating wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to us on YouTube, spreading the word wherever you and your tribe congregate, or just by sending us your positive thoughts and intentions. In a quantumly intertwined and holographic multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.